Hello, this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be totaling up some of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit The Blob That Ate Everyone. Not everything, like my brain keeps trying to autocorrect it to. I was initially excited to read this one because it's a book I owned as a kid and remembered enjoying, but this book was a bit of a letdown in the end. It has a nice build-up to some blob action, but then needlessly slams on the brakes. If you go in expecting a blob extravaganza, you're going to be disappointed, and I think if you skip this one, you're not missing much. This 1997 cover is great. I'm always a fan of the covers where you can really spend some time looking at the little details, and the pile of blob destruction is a good example of this. I also like the design of the blob. It kind of reminds me of Krang from the Ninja Turtles. I just think this is a really solid cover. I also really like the 2006 Slime Border one because I'm a hypocrite. I usually complain about the covers that are too one-note color-wise, but this one is like, bam, pink. And I'm biased towards the covers that use less traditional horror colors. I was happy to see we got a later 2015 cover, and it's just a good week for covers because once again, I really like this one. This blob looks a lot nastier than the original, which kind of just looks like chewing gum really. I think it's the pronounced purple veins and general sliminess of this blob that really makes it stand out. I think this may be one of my favorite of the newer covers. This book was featured on a trading card book tear out, and not much else because life's not fair. The back of the book has some new things though, like this promo for the Goosebumps Postcard Book 2, which says, "Boo dudes! More greetings from the world of Goosebumps. I've got a brand new collection of 30 totally terrifying cards in the Goosebumps Postcard Book 2, with a different scary Goosebumps cover on the front of each one. Collect them, swap them, or send them to your favorite monster. Yours Ghoulie, Curly." There's also an ad for the Goosebumps Camp Collection, featuring Welcome to Camp Nightmare, The Horror at Camp Jelly Jam, and Ghost Camp. I have to say the timing of this is kind of strange. If they had just waited a little bit longer, they could have included next week's camp book, The Curse of Camp Cold Lake. The most notable thing about this collection is that the books are all bound together in a special hardback book that contains a built-in book light, which is pretty awesome. Our front take says, "He's no picky eater," and I'd have to agree, there's a little bit of everything in this junk pile. Our back take says, "Read it and scream," and I like this one, despite it being pretty generic, because it at least acknowledges that a solid portion of this story is actually about Zacky's own horror stories, but let's check out the blurb on the back. A famous horror writer. That's what Zachy Beecham wants to be. He's written a story about a giant blob monster, a pink slimy creature who eats up an entire town. Then, Zachy finds the typewriter in a burned down antique store. He takes it home and starts typing. But there's something really odd about that typewriter, something really dangerous, because now every scary word Zachy writes is starting to come true. Okay, on to our summary. The book opens with our introduction to Zachy Beecham, and I know I'm actually pronouncing that right this time because Stein was kind enough to include a pronunciation guide. Zachy is kind of all over the place these first few pages. He's discussing his best friend Alex and Adam for a bit, but then keeps stopping to reference an upcoming monster attack. In the span of 2 pages, we have 3 page breaks that are basically, "and then the monster attacked." It's really odd and not the typical Goosebumps structure. Zachy finally stays on track long enough to tell us about this monster encounter. He and Alex are busy digging for purple worms when they're suddenly attacked by the monster. I dropped the worm I'd been carrying and took a big step back. It looks like a giant human heart," Alex cried. She was right. The monster made another loud squish as it bounced over the grass towards us. It bounced like a giant beach ball, taller than Alex and I, nearly as tall as the garage. It was pink and wet, and throbbing. Brum, brum, brum. It pulsed like a heart. It had 2 tiny black eyes. The eyes glowed and stared straight ahead. On top of the pink blob, I thought I saw curled up snakes, but I stared in horror as I realized they weren't snakes. They were thick purple veins, arteries tied together in a knot. Brum, brum, brum. The monster throbbed and bounced. I groaned as I saw a sticky trail of white slime left behind on the grass. Terrified groans escaped my throat. My heart had to be pounding 100 miles an hour. I took another step back, then another. And as I backed away, I saw a crack open up in the monster's middle. At first, I thought the pink blob was cracking apart. But as the crack grew wider, I realized I was staring at its mouth. The mouth opened wider and wider, wide enough to swallow a human. And then a fat purple tongue plopped out. The tongue made a wet splat as it hit the grass. I groaned again. My stomach lurched. I nearly lost my lunch. The end of the tongue was shaped like a shovel, a fat, sticky purple shovel. To shovel people into its gaping mouth? Thick white slime poured from the monster's mouth. "It's drooling," I choked out. "Run," Alex cried. I turned and tripped over the edge of the driveway. I landed hard on my elbows and knees, and I looked back in time to see the drooling pink mouth open wider as the tongue wrapped around me, pulling me in. This all ends up being a chapter cliffhanger fake-out because, like the blurb on the back warned us, Zachy is an aspiring horror writer and this is all just one of his stories, so the weird story structure makes sense in hindsight. Zachy's friends are real though, and Alex always loves his stories, while Adam never does. This time is no exception. Adam is busy critiquing Zachy's work when suddenly the three kids are all startled by a screeching blur that zips across their feet in another sudden chapter cliffhanger. Adam's dad appears and is like, "Did anyone see the cat go through here?" because he stepped on its tail. So this mystery screeching blur was just a frightened cat? Not really sure why Stein felt the need to include this scene. Zachy and Alex decide to head home, and along the way they pass an old antique shop that was apparently struck by lightning the day before and is all burned up. Zachy seizes the opportunity for a little exploring and races inside the charred shop before Alex can stop him. He's having a great time wandering around the destruction when he spots an old-fashioned typewriter sitting up on a shelf. I think I'm getting old because all my mind keeps wandering to is how that poor shop owner just lost their livelihood, and now this kid's rooting around in the ashes like it's no big deal. Zachy gets a little calmer though, because as he's reaching up for the typewriter, he's suddenly electrocuted in a chapter cliffhanger. I stood on tiptoe and reached for the old typewriter. Ow! I felt a hard shock of pain. It shot through my body, stunned me, took away my breath. Over my stunned cry, I heard a sharp crackle of electricity. I bent over, helpless, as a bright blue flame shot around my body. Blue. I only saw blue. The deepest blue I'd ever seen. I'm floating in the sky, I realized. I'm weightless, and I'm floating. Floating in the blue, blue sky. The blue faded to white. Was I still floating? Was I moving at all? Was I breathing? I struggled to speak, to shout, to make any kind of sound. The white faded quickly, to gray, then black. I heard myself moan. Dark. So dark now. I was surrounded by darkness. I blinked again, and then realized I was staring into the darkness of the ruined antique shop. Once Zachy comes to, he spots Alex, and she's convinced he must have touched a live wire or something. Zachy is now all tingly, but must really want that typewriter, because once he's back up on his feet, he immediately goes right back for the typewriter. Once he has it, he's ready to skedaddle, but Alex was kind of like, you can't just take it, it still counts as stealing. But Zachy is unfazed. Before following through on the theft, the two kids suddenly realize they're not alone. Zachy drops the typewriter, and the two kids dive behind some shelving. They then watch tensely as a woman scans the room with a flashlight looking for the trespassers. The kids think they're safe until Alex lets out a poorly timed sneeze, and the woman catches them from behind. The woman introduces herself as Miss Carter, and she's the store owner, so she isn't too pleased to be dealing with two trespassing kids and the destruction of her life. She ends up being a lot nicer than I would be and gives Zachy the typewriter and an old fountain pen, and then sends them on their way. Zachy is stoked about this new typewriter, but Alex is suspicious and thinks Miss Carter was a little too eager to give that typewriter away. Zachy doesn't care though because he's ready to get writing. He's also way more excited about a pen than most 12-year-olds would be. Once home, we're introduced to Zachy's parents, who are crossword enthusiasts with bad tempers, so Zachy thinks it's best just to leave out the electrocution part of the how I got my typewriter story. After dinner, Zachy returns to his room to find the typewriter is glowing electric blue, like when he got shocked earlier. He goes to get his parents, but when they all finally return, the typewriter is no longer glowing and buzzing. Zachy proceeds to touch the typewriter in a chapter cliffhanger, because he's already been electrocuted once today, so what's another shock? This doesn't go anywhere though, because we jump to school the next day where Zachy reveals he didn't get shocked. Alex lets him know this story would have been more interesting if the typewriter had fried him, and I kinda have to agree. At school, we're introduced to a set of twins, Emmy and Annie, who don't like Zachy or Alex, but get along with Adam. The twins spend some time taunting Zachy by saying he believes in monsters and is a scaredy cat. This all culminates in Zachy opening his locker and being attacked by some mysterious white creatures in a chapter cliffhanger. This just ends up being some little white mice, and one has somehow gotten tangled in Zachy's hair. The twins are cackling as Zachy panics, and Adam calmly plucks the mouse off of him and puts it in his pocket. Zachy is now embarrassed and apparently in trouble because the principal appears on the scene, demanding to know who let the mice out of science class. Adam and the twins are nowhere to be found, so Zachy gets hauled into the principal's office. I'd be questioning my friendship with Adam at this point. We then hop to dinner that night, and Zachy has managed to avoid telling his parents about his shitty day. Alex arrives and almost blows Zachy's cover, but he's able to cut her off before she can. They head up to Zachy's room so he can show her his new revised Blob story. Alice is confused why he wrote it by hand versus using the typewriter, so Zachy lets us all know he uses the antique fountain pen Miss Carter gave him for the rough draft because he only types his final drafts. Now that Zachy is ready for the final draft, he goes to get the typewriter, but it's nowhere to be found. This mystery is short-lived though, because Zachy's dad appears in the doorway with the typewriter. He's fixed it up for Zachy, so now it's officially ready to type. Zachy gets to writing his story, and I guess Alex is just sitting there watching him type. The standards for entertainment were lower in the 90s. He types, "It was a dark and stormy night," so he's not getting any points for originality here. Once the sentence is finished, lightning cracks across the sky and the room suddenly goes dark. The dad appears with some candles and comments how strange the storm is, since it literally appeared out of nowhere. Zachy thinks this is some great ambience for the scary story writing, and Alex is still content just to watch him type at the typewriter some more. He then types, "The wind began to howl," and is startled when the window starts shaking from a sudden gust of intense wind. Alex notices Zachy is now shaking because he's creeping himself out. She's really hell-bent on watching him type though, and encourages him to write the next sentence. Zachy types, Alex and Zachy are alone in the dark house, listening to the storm. And Alex is thrilled to see this story is about them. Zachy decides they need more candles before he can keep writing and goes to find his dad. But in a chapter cliffhanger, his dad is nowhere to be found. Once they realize his dad's car is still in the driveway, yet he's still missing, Alex quickly deduces everything Zachy is typing on the typewriter is coming true. Zachy thinks it's just a coincidence, to which Alex replies, "Oh, big word." So Stein clunkily has Zachy define the word in case our kid readers are confused. Alex then wants to test out the typewriter theory by having Zachy type something else so they can see if it comes true. Zachy goes with the classic, they heard a knock at the door. The kids then nearly shit their pants when they immediately hear a knock at the door. Zachy races to the door, but Alex is afraid to open it. When they finally do, they're shocked to find no one there. Alex insists this is because Zachy didn't specify who was at the door, and wants him to add another sentence because she's convinced this typewriter has powers, and that's why Miss Carter gave it away. If I was Miss Carter, I'd just type, and then she won the lotto, and call it a day. I wouldn't give it to two little thieving children. Zachy ends up typing, Adam knocked on the front door, which summons Adam, who has no idea why he's there or how he got there. Zachy is now on board with the magic typewriter theory, but Adam thinks Alex and Zachy are just trying to get him back for the mouse prank. Zachy decides to write the next line of his scary story, because in spite of everything that's happening, he still thinks it's a good idea to write a horror story on a typewriter that's been established as magic. Zachy writes, the storm suddenly stopped. All was quiet. Too quiet. This causes the storm to cease, but Adam remains unconvinced. While Zachy and Alex are arguing on how to convince Adam about the magic typewriter, Adam is busy typing away. The kids try to stop him, but it's too late. He's already written, the blob monster hid in Zachy's basement, waiting for fresh meat. Adam then races out of the house cackling. Alex is horrified, but Zachy is more concerned about Adam ruining his story for reasons unknown. Zachy, there are bigger fish to fry at this point. Zachy crumbles up the paper before realizing why Alex is so worried. I don't know how he could forget about a magic typewriter's power so quickly, but he did. The kids try to tell themselves that since blob monsters aren't real, they can't be summoned by the typewriter, but then they hear thudding coming up from the basement. They listen in horror as the thuds get closer until the door bursts open in a chapter cliffhanger. Surprise, it's Zachy's dad. He's been busy messing with the circuit breaker in the basement and checking on the neighbors. That's why the kids couldn't locate him earlier. This leaves Zachy and Alex doubting everything they just experienced, so Alex thinks they should go into the basement to see if the blob monster came true. I think I'd just write, and then a $100 bill appeared in my pocket to test out the typewriter magic versus investigating a potential monster situation, but what do I know? I'm also a bit disappointed Zachy's dad appeared because it's page 80 and we really needed some monster action. I think these past few pages have brought whatever momentum the story was building to a halt. The kids then spend a few pages exploring a creepy ass basement, which I can appreciate because I've always hated the basement growing up. In a chapter cliffhanger, Zachy hears a steady slap slap sound and starts shrieking that the blob monster is real. They can hear the blob monster slapping around the corner and realize they're gonna have to run past him to make it to the basement stairs. The kids decide to run together, but once they make it around the corner, they realize they're both idiots and it was just some gardening gloves flapping around near a cracked window. These kind of fake outs should be reserved for the start of the book, not when we have like 20 pages left in the story. The kids laugh to themselves about how this has all been one big coincidence, and Alex heads home. The story then jumps to Saturday, and Zachy's off to pick up a few things from the grocery store for his mom. He takes the time to share that he loves Pop-Tarts, specifically eating them raw, and I support this. I don't think I ever put them in the toaster as a kid. The real magic is to get the fudge sundae ones and put them in the freezer for diabetic goodness. At the store, we're introduced to Mrs. Jack, who runs the store and hates children because she thinks they're little thieves, and in Zach's case, she's not wrong. Stein also lovingly describes her as having 12 chins and being as wide as a grocery aisle. Zachy gets transfixed in the meat section on the carcass of a cow being portioned out by the butcher, like just staring at this cow carcass because the plot calls for it. While staring, he suddenly hears, fresh meat, in a chapter cliffhanger. Is this the blob somehow? No, it's Adam, who appears from behind the counter with the twins, all giggling at how scared Zachy got. What kind of prank is this? Let's all hide behind the deli counter and whisper at Zachy. It'll be great. Miss Jack hears the sounds of children's laughter and chases Adam and the twins out of the store. Zachy finishes his shopping, but is still furious when he gets home because he knows they're all going to tell everybody how scared he got. He goes up to his typewriter to vent his frustrations, and he writes the scariest blob story yet. About time, Zachy. We're basically done with this book at this point. In the story, he has the blob monster terrorizing the entire town, gobbling up cops and causing chaos. That's pretty much the only details we get on his entire multi-page story. Zachy's mom appears and sends him back to the grocery store to pick up some bread. While heading to the store, he notices a lot of people seem to be running and driving erratically. He turns the corner and finally sees what all the commotion is about, the blob monster. I gaped at the enormous pink blob monster throbbing on the next corner. A horrified moan escaped my throat. It looked just as I described in my story, I realized, like a huge slimy human heart, pink and wet, with tiny black eyes and purple veins knotted on top of its head. and a mouth cut into its belly. Throbbing. It's my monster, I cried. Zachy spends some time just staring at the monster while everybody else is running away, which results in him getting snatched up. His purple tongue leaped out at me. Hey, I cried out and struggled to back away. The hot, sticky tongue wrapped around my leg, started to pull me towards the slimy open mouth. Let go, I tugged on the tongue as hard as I could. Help me. 2 dark uniformed police officers leapt in front of me. They had their nightsticks raised. With angry cries, they began pounding at the throbbing creature. Pound, pound, pound. The nightsticks made soft, flopping sounds against each hit. The blob monster uttered a sickening gurgle, and his tongue slid off my leg. Run, one of the officers screamed. Get going. My legs were shaking so hard I nearly fell. I could still feel slimy hot tongue on my leg. I stumbled back, and gaped in horror as the blob monster pulled open its mouth. The fat purple tongue swung around both police officers. They beat it with their sticks, they shoved it, they tried to wrestle free, but the tongue tightened around them, and then pulled them into the huge open mouth in the creature's belly. It pulled them both inside, and then the mouth slammed shut with a disgusting splat. I like that Zachy got these 2 cops eaten by just being useless. He starts to race home when it occurs to him that he actually wrote that the blob monster followed him home in the story too, so he tries to escape town, but it follows after him. He ends up coming across Alex and Adam, and he tries to warn them about the blob, but it's too late. Adam marches up to it thinking it's some sort of elaborate balloon and gets eaten. How this boy mistook a giant blob monster for a balloon, we will never know. The good news is this is where Zachy stopped writing, so Alex and him still have a chance to defeat the blob. They race to Zachy's house to type an ending to the story, but the blob follows after them. Zachy tries his best to type a happy ending where the blob disappears and all the damage it's done is undone, but the keys jam and the blob monster bounces into his bedroom. I'm fairly confused on the size of this creature, if it's eating full-grown people, but also bouncing through doorways, but whatever, the cover is still great. The blob monster shoots out a long tongue and slurps up the typewriter, leaving the kids with no ways to finish the ending. This is until Zachy remembers the pen from earlier, but it also gets sucked into the blob. Zachy then comes to the conclusion that maybe the power is within him after being electrified because only the stuff he writes comes true. What Adam wrote didn't. Zachy decides to concentrate on the blob disappearing, and surprise, it works. He then resummons Adam, and the kids all laugh happily ever after. The ramifications of this power would be terrifying. It's like the Twilight Zone episode, It's a Good Life, where the kid is basically a god and can control reality around him. But there's no time to think about that, because Stein has decided the last chapter is going to be complete and total nonsense. On the last 2 pages, 2 blob monsters are sitting and discussing the story we just read. The pink blob monster wrote the story, and his friend the green blob monster is eager to give feedback. The green blob monster thought that the humans were disgusting and found the ending tragic when the kids made the blob monster disappear, and thinks the story should have a happy ending. The pink blob monster agrees and decides he's going to retype the ending and have the blob monster eat all the kids. So that's how this one ends, with a big blob of nonsense. I was extra excited to see this episode because I was somehow unaware of its existence. Like, I was fully prepared to do a random episode until I read the comments on my last video. I didn't really see anything that interesting for notable actors, so let's jump right into the episode. The episode is getting right to it with this mystery crate 20 seconds in.
Top secret science project. Beware.
Now I get why it was double featured in the DVD ad with Go Eat Worms. Alex just goes straight to playing with the worms for some reason, which leads us to a jump scare. I like the lasso sound effect we have going on here. Just kidding, this was all just a story.
What do you guys think?
That was the scariest story.
I still think it's funny these kids just casually walk into a burned up building. We found the typewriter, that means it's time for some special effects. I like this inclusion of the non-subtle shoulder scare.
Oh, it's just you.
The color palette for this scene is like refried beans. I'm impressed just how closely they're following the book.
I've never seen a storm blow in this quickly.
Yeah, pretty weird.
There should be typewriter ASMR.
A knock.
This episode really drills in the magic of the typewriter. Like, every event gets one of these flashbacks from 10 seconds prior.
Ow. What is that?
Poor Adam just got summoned from bed.
What are you doing here?
Whoa! Did we disturb you?
I like Adam's evil little laugh.
Gotta go. See ya.
We just can't get enough of these typing shots. Where is the growling coming from then? I see. Adam's meat prank repurposed.
Fresh meat. Beware the blob monster.
We're getting real 90s with the setting.
The blob monster attacks the video store in the mall.
It kind of looks like Saber from Welcome to Camp Nightmare. This is like George's jerk store comeback.
Kitty section's over there. Right. I must be in the jerk section.
Well, the jerk store called. They're running out of you.
I think we must be getting closer to this blob reveal. I'd like to get a proper look at this thing for a video thumbnail.
It's a real monster. Radio controlled. Cool.
R.I.P. Adam. I still can't believe I missed this episode when I love slime monsters in general.
It's coming!
What are you talking about?
He typed that the blob was in the bed.
Zach has magic hair. I think I preferred the episode even if they just skipped the book ending and went with awkward laughing instead. Overall, I thought the Blob That Ate Everyone was just okay. Stein did a nice job building up the suspense and mystery around the typewriter, only to slow it down by not having the blob in the basement. I did like the twist of the power being in Zachy, but I felt like it came at the expense of the story's momentum. The last chapter was also so out of left field, it's hard for me to even associate it with the rest of the book. It felt like a gag that would have worked on the TV show, but didn't translate well to the book. I'm going to give this one 3 out of 5 typewriters. I think this book had potential, but didn't deliver on it. Okay, on to our totals. The Blob That Ate Everyone didn't have any vomit, shoulder scares, or it was only a dreams, but it did have some 90s moments. In Getting Jiggy with the 90s, we had one 90s moment. This was a specific call out to Zachy's Trapper Keeper, which really kind of died out by 1997, so Stein was a little behind the times. Also, one of my commenters pointed out that I missed an obvious reference to Biggie Smalls in Don't Go to Sleep last week, so I'm retroactively adding it. This raises our Goosebumps total to 170 jiggy 90s moments. There were just 2 pranks in the Blob That Ate Everyone. The first was when Zachy's locker is filled with mice, and the second is the nonsensical fresh meat scene at the grocery store. This raises our total to 123 pranks. Our asshole victims this week are Adam, who is a frenemy that ends up getting eaten by the blob, even if he is immediately rescued and potentially not even real in this book. This raises our total to 31 asshole victims. The Blob That Ate Everyone was pretty average on chapter cliffhangers, with a total of 13 cliffhangers. This raises our Goosebumps series total to 675. The clunky award this week has to go to chapters 2 to 3, where the kids are all startled by a screeching cat, which is a cheap jump scare in horror movies even, and it really doesn't translate well to the page. Shocker ending. Our big twist to this book is some tacked on nonsense. In the last chapter, we find out this has all been a story written by an aspiring author blob monster, and he's actually going to make it a happy ending by eating the children. This raises our Goosebumps series total to 46. Well, that's it for the Blob That Ate Everyone. I think I hyped myself up on this one and then was disappointed, so it was some self-sabotage. Next week is The Curse of Camp Cold Lake, which has one of the best covers, yet I don't recall ever reading it. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the Blob That Ate Everyone. What did you think of that ending? Do you ever find yourself transfixed in horror at the grocery store? Do you think Zachy is a terrible name, or is that just me? Also, what did you think of my blobby horror clips this week? I tried to spice it up, considering this is the 4th book featuring blobby slime monsters, and I can only show so much of the blob. Anyways, as always, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
the pride, the love,